Okay, everyone, it looks like it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division today as we go over the district request for indirect cost rates for 2025-2026 school year. This presentation aims to provide comprehensive information about the indirect cost rate proposal, also known as ICRP, additional cost workbook, ACW, and the certification process. Just as a quick reminder, this training is applicable to school districts exclusively, and it does not extend to charter schools, which they follow a distinct process. For those of you that have attended our presentation in the past, you'll find that our training today remains consistent with previous years, so therefore no changes are in our process and only updated dates. If you can just go ahead and take some time at this moment to scan this QR code, it is to check in into today's training. The title of the training is ICRP ACW and Certification Training, which is marked December 11th, 2024. So we'll go ahead and leave this up for a minute or so that way you can go ahead and take some time to scan the QR code. Okay, and then if needed, we'll just bring it back up at the end of the presentation if anybody had missed it. But we're going to go ahead and move forward into the presentation. So here is just our standard disclaimer, which indicates that this presentation and slide deck represent TEA's interpretation of federal laws and guidance pertaining to the issuance of indirect cost rates. However, it's important to note that this guidance does not constitute legal advice. So therefore, LEAs are strongly advised to seek legal counsel before taking any actions based on the information and guidance provided in this presentation. Presenters today will be myself, Ashley Rubio, and the project lead of this topic, Saida Dringa. This presentation is conducted in a webinar setting, therefore all mics have been muted. So we do encourage, if you have any questions during our presentation, to be sure to type them in that Q&A section at the bottom, little panel that you see there, and they will be reviewed and answered by our supporting colleagues, which we have Kathy Lovett and Trisha Murray on here as well. We will also have some time for some questions at the end of our presentation if needed. So we'll just go ahead and jump in. Today's agenda includes several topics, which include the role of the United States Department of Education, ICRP, and the ICRP ACW overview, the timeline, completing and submitting the ICRP ACW, ICRP next steps, and reviewing and certifying the ICRP. Now, before we jump into the agenda, we would like to kind of point out our indirect cost rates webpage, which could be found on the TEA website. Here, our team has provided LEAs with up-to-date resources and tools for the new cycle to use while completing their ICRP additional cost workbook. Here, you will find accessible links like the ICRP additional cost workbook in Excel workbook, the ICRP ACW instruction manual, the ICRP ACW FAQ, which are extremely helpful. In addition, we also have provided copies of this presentation that we're going over today in PDF format for guidance. And also we did make it available as well a week before this presentation. So whoever signed up using their email in the Zoom list, that was sent out to you all. As well as I think it was yesterday or the day before it was also sent out again. But like I mentioned, it's on our website if you want to pull up a PDF version of this presentation. So let's go ahead and start getting into a little bit of the meat and everybody's fun topic, the methodology overview. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of our USDE methodology. The methodology for calculating indirect cost rates is dictated by federal laws and by the U.S. Department of Education, USDE. By designating TEA as the cognizant agency for indirect cost, USDE authorizes TEA to issue indirect cost rates to independent school districts, open enrollment charter schools, education service centers, and other government agencies. USDE and TEA are in a delegation agreement where they approve our method and procedures of calculating indirect cost rates. The current delegation agreement that was received in 2019 is still in effect for next cycle. Therefore, there are no changes in the indirect cost calculation, and the application process for 25-26 that you see in this presentation is still applicable. The reason why our forms and procedures are consistent is because they are approved by USDE, and we cannot change our process without a new delegation agreement. USDE has extended this delegation agreement through 25-26. Here's an overview of our USDE delegation agreement, which beginning of the school year 2020-2021 and beyond, we received a new delegation agreement from USDE that specifies the approved indirect cost rate calculation methodology. In that agreement, USDE reaffirmed and clarified current procedures in the LEA plan. No indirect cost rate extensions are allowed, and all indirect cost rate extensions beyond 2017 and 2018 were rescinded. Rates must be requested by districts every year and then calculated by TEA every year. 3 years of financial data must be used to calculate indirect cost rates. For example, to calculate rates for 25-26 school year or fiscal year 26, financial data from 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24 will be utilized. So now we'll go over the indirect cost rate types. You'll see here that there are 2 rate types that TEA issues. Restricted rate, which is used for grant programs where supplement, not supplant requirement applies, and the unrestricted rate, which are applied to grants not subject to the federal supplement, not supplant requirement. So just keep in mind that most of these grants that TEA administers are subject to supplement, not supplant, and the restricted rate applies to them. The restricted rate is lower than the unrestricted rates, so always keep that in mind. Just kind of an overview of supplement, not supplant. This requirement means that the grant funds must be only used to enhance and support existing state and locally funded activities. The grant funds must not be used to replace state and locally funded activities. Most of the federal grants that TEA administers are subject to this requirement, and the restricted rate is applied to them. So because of the size and the amount and complexity of the data required by the ICRP, TEA has developed a data collection methodology that utilizes PEIMS data. However, a small amount of the required data cannot be obtained through PEIMS, so therefore districts will be asked to provide a small amount through the additional cost data to TEA. So districts can easily obtain this additional cost data by running simple queries within their financial accounting systems. Districts will not be required to analyze or classify any costs. So because districts are required to request rates, and because TEA needs a small amount of that additional cost information for the ICRP, the procedure for the districts to request indirect cost rates for 25-26 is through the submission of the ICRP ACW. So therefore, the rates effective beginning 2018-2019 school year, districts have been required to request indirect cost rates each year by completing that ICRP ACW. The submission of the ACW does serve as the district's official request for indirect cost rates. So if a completed ACW is not submitted by the district, TEA will then not calculate or issue rates for that district for that upcoming school year. Once the ACW is submitted, then TEA will merge the ACW data with the PEIMS data to produce the completed ICRP, which will have that made available to the districts. And the final steps for districts will be to review the ICRP and, of course, certify. Once TEA receives the ACW, we will pre-populate the ICRP with the following data. The district submitted ICRP ACW will provide approximately 10% of the data required in the completed ICRP. TEA will obtain the remaining data needed from the ICRP from the district's certified PEMS data. TEA will then populate an ICRP for each district that submits an ICRP ACW by merging PEMS with the ACW that was submitted by the LEA. TEA will then provide the complete ICRP to districts to review and certify. So again, just a reminder, TEA is requesting this additional data via the ACW because that data that's required for indirect cost rate calculation cannot be obtained through PEMS data. Most of the expenditure data submitted in this cost for indirect cost rate calculation. So leaving these costs in the calculation causes the results of the rates to be much lower than it should be. So these costs, the costs will distort the expenditure base. So that's why we do need that ICRP ACW submitted. In addition, just ensure that districts do maintain a copy of all the financial records that are used to complete the ICRP ACW. So this is a good point to remember to print this timeline out. I like to have it, really close and visible to my desk so that way I can see when things are coming up and when they're due. Or you can take a picture, screenshot, whatever you feel that will be useful for you. But we'll just kind of go over the timeline for indirect cost rate. So this timeline does consist of important dates. The ACW was made available to districts on October the 31st through the Indirect Cost Rates website and GFFC reports. The due date is January 17th. So we are, getting close to Christmas, and who knows, January is going to come up tomorrow. So, just get ready to make sure you have that all ready to go and submitted. So let's go ahead and put a pin on that date. TEA will then post the complete ICRPs by April 17th, 2025, and that'll be posted in GFFC reports and data collections. At that point, districts will be required to review, certify the acceptance of the resulting indirect cost rates by May 16th. So again, grab another pin for those dates that'll be coming up in the following year that's coming. Finally, TEA will post official rates by July 1st of 2025. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand the next part of the presentation to Saida, who will be going over how to complete the ICRP ACW.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you could join us today. And for those who have completed this training, as Ashley mentioned, it will serve as a helpful refresher. And for those attending for the first time, I trust you'll find the information useful for completing the indirect cost rate application, which is the completion of the ACW. And in the upcoming slides, I'll walk you through all the various tabs in the additional course workbook and highlight the information that TEA requires from districts, which is not currently available through PEMS. And before we dive into the data being requested, I'd like to highlight a few key points about the ACW. In the first year, districts are required to provide data spanning 3 years. After that, the districts will be required to provide data only for the year not previously submitted. And districts should run queries in their accounting system to gather in most of the requested information that we'll be looking at examples as well. As I noted in that previous slide, districts are only required to submit 3 years of data in that initial year. And in subsequent years, districts will be required to submit the data only for those years that are not previously provided. And districts should run accounting system queries to retrieve most of the requested information. A staff member knowledgeable in accounting system queries should complete the workbook. And at this stage, the district is not required to perform cost analysis or classification. It is crucial not to leave any section blank or incomplete, as doing so may lead to delays in the district receiving indirect cost rate due to insufficient information. And if there are no costs to report in a particular section, please indicate a 0 as the expenditure amount. In the following slides, we'll be examining the section of the additional cost fiscal year 24 tab. And then additionally, like I said, examples of queries to retrieve the requested data will be provided. The first tab of the ACW is the LA information and certification of additional costs. Please provide the following information for the IST to confirm the accuracy of all submitted data. So we need you to select the IST name in the pull-down menu or the pull-down field, which is for your name of LEA. And once the LEA name is selected, the CDN number will populate, and the name and the CDN number will also populate to the header of each worksheet going forward. And the name of the primary contact, this will be the person completing the workbook. And if we have any question regarding the data submitted in the ACW, or if there is any missing information, this will be the person we'll contact. So we need the title, the phone number, and the email address of the person completing the form, and the day of completion and submission. Next up, we have the checklist tab. This checklist is intended to assist LEAs in addressing and providing clarification for potential questions that may arise while completing the workbook. We strongly encourage you to review your data entry using this checklist tab before submitting the ICRP ACW. This will help ensure that all the tabs and sections of the ACW are complete, reducing the likelihood of errors and avoiding the need for resubmission. So one thing I would like to mention here is our team has observed that LEAs who utilize this tab have experienced fewer issues during our review process. Again, so we really highly encourage you to take a look at it, use it as a way to check your work or your completion of the ACW before you submit it to TA. Next up, we have the organizational chart sample tab. This tab just includes a sample of the org chart that districts are required to submit for fiscal year 2024. This sample serves as a reference for district to understand the format and the content expected in their organizational chart submission. The next tab is where you'll be inserting the org chart for your district. So the process for submitting the org chart is the same as last year. Districts can insert their org chart into this worksheet, and instructions on how to do so can be found within the highlighted section on this tab. Districts are not required and will not submit a separate document in GFSC reports and data collection. The org chart must support the Chief Executive Officer information on the additional cost fiscal year 24 tab. Therefore, this year, LEAs need to submit fiscal 2024 or school year 23-24 org chart in this tab. Okay, next up, we'll be looking at the additional cost fiscal year tab. And the first section of that tab is function 41, which is general governance and direct cost. And in this section, you need to enter the expenditure for org codes 702, 703, and 720 by fund function and object code as requested here in the worksheet. Except for the excluded cost and org 720 direct cost, expenditure within function 41 are treated as indirect cost for the indirect cost rate calculation. And then when calculating the indirect cost rate, expenditure within function 41 are treated as follows. So your org 702 school board is an excluded cost, org 703 tax office is an excluded cost, and then org 720 direct cost is a direct cost. We'll be looking at two examples of simple queries in the section, and we'll use line item 1 as an example, which is your fund 100 function 41 object 6100 for 702 school board. In this instant, two queries are needed. The query expenditure for Fund 100, Function 41, Object 6100, Org 702, And then Fund 100, Function 41, Object 6144, Org 702. From the resulting amounts, you need to deduct that Object 6144 total from the Object 6100 total and report the amount in the corresponding line item. And next, we'll be looking at line item 2, which is Fund 100, Function 41, Object 6200 for 703 tax office. And for this one, we only need one query. One query is needed, and the query expenditure for Fund 100, Function 41, Object 6200 for Org 703. And then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. The next section is TRS on behalf payments and or Medicare Part D payments. Enter the expenditure for all TRS on behalf payments and or Medicare Part D payments made during the applicable fiscal year by the appropriate fund, function, and Object 6144 code as requested in the worksheet. These payments are considered excluded in the indirect cost rate calculation. An example query here again, we'll be looking at line item 1, which is your Fund 100 function, Fund 100, I'm sorry, Object 6144 for function 1X. The one query is needed, the query expenditure for Fund 100, function 1X, Object 6144, and then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Next up, the next section is food and milk, cost of food service program. You need to enter all food and milk expenditure in a food service program made during the applicable fiscal year by appropriate fund, function, and Object 6341 code as requested in the worksheet. An example query is for Fund 100, Object 6341 for function 3X. Only one query is needed, the query expenditure for Fund 100, function 3X, Object 6341. Then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Expenditures for food and milk in a food service program are considered excluded cost. Next up, we have depreciation expense amount. Here you need to enter the total depreciation expense charged to governmental activities for buildings, improvements, and furniture, equipment, and vehicles. Reporting depreciation expense accurately is essential and required, and under or over-reporting depreciation amounts will significantly distort the calculated indirect cost rate. So the information needed to complete the depreciation expense amounts can be found in the notes to the financial statement section of your district's AFR under capital asset or capital asset activity. And the district must enter the depreciation amounts for the total cost for both buildings, improvements, and furniture. Both buildings, improvements, and furniture, equipment, vehicles, and it cannot exceed the net depreciation amount listed for the assets as reported in the notes to the financial statement section. Here's an example of an capital asset activity from a sample district and how the costs are broken down and reported. You need to determine the increase for buildings and improvements and capital lease, if applicable and itemized, determine the increase for furniture, equipment, and vehicles. Then ensure the total increase are equal to the amount of depreciation charged to governmental activities. Then you need to review the expenses, all the expenses that are charged to governmental activities, and note any charge to federal funds, and those need to be removed before you report your amount in that section. The next section is payment to fiscal agent, member district of shared service arrangements, or SSAs. There is a question that you need to answer, and you need to select an answer from the pull down list, which is you need to answer yes or no to the question, did the LEA make payments to fiscal agent? and or member district of an SSA funded with federal grant funds from Function 93. Please note that the question is asking about payments from federal grant funds. Many districts are participating in a non-federally funded SSAs. If your answer is no, then you can proceed to the next section as no further data entry is required. But if your answer is yes, you do need to complete the section by providing the requested details on any payments made to fiscal agent and or member districts of an SSA for federally funded SSAs. The best query to gather this data is a query of payment history for function 93, object 649X. This report will provide the SSA payments by fund. You need to itemize the payments in the worksheet based on the funding source. Over here, it is important to include the CFDA number, which is now known as Assistance Listing Number or ALA number, as this number confirms that the payment was made with federal funds. If there is no ALN number, then the payment was not likely made from federal funds and should not be included or reported in this area. These payments are considered excluded cost in the indirect cost rate calculation, except for the first $25,000 of each payment, which is counted as direct cost. Although you will be inputting the total amount of the SSA payments, the final ICRP will calculate as direct cost only the first $25,000 of each payments, and then the remainder of each payment will be considered excluded cost. So you do need to input the whole amount on this section. Next up, we have the federal subrecipient items or federal subgrants and federal grant pass-through funds. A subrecipient item is the payment of a federal grant funds by the district to another entity to carry out a portion or all of a federal grant program. A subrecipient or the payee is the entity to which your district will distribute funds in a subgrant. The federal subrecipient section is used if your district issued a subgrant for food service program and or other pass-through funds given to other entities that are not your fiscal agent or member district of an SSA. One thing I would like to highlight here for the purpose of the ICRP ACW, we have separated payments to fiscal agents and SSAs from other federal subrecipient items to define costs. Here again, there's a question if you need to select yes or no to the question, did the school district distribute federal grant funds as a subgrant or as a federal grant pass-through funds? If your answer is no, then you can proceed to the next section as no further data entry is required. And most districts will answer no to this question. If the answer is yes, you do need to complete the section by providing the requested details on the subrecipient items. You need to enter all federal subgrants and or other federal grant pass-through funds by selecting the fund, function, and object codes under which the payment was made. Then you need to enter the payee name, a description of the subrecipient item, the ALN number, the begin and end dates, and then finally the amount. And here again, it is important to include that ALN number, as I mentioned on the previous slide, as this number confirms that the payment was made with federal funds. And if there is no ALN number, then the payment was not likely made from the federal funds and should not be reported here. For the purpose of the ICRP, TA is only concerned with major subgrants and has adopted the accepted definition that a major subgrant is one that exceeds $25,000 in expenditure per year. And for this reason, please do not include subgrants or subcontracts or subgrants that are less than $25,000 and do not include the first $25,000 of payments in subgrant or subcontracts that are greater than $25,000. Districts will not have subgrant or grant pass-through funds on educational grants. However, districts may have subgrant or grant pass-through funds on non-educational grants awarded by another agency. J is not expecting to see items entered in this section unless a district has issued subgrant for their food service program. Federal subrecipient items are considered excluded cost in the indirect cost rate calculation, except for the first $25,000 of each payment for a major subgrant, which is greater than $25,000, and that the first $25,000 of major subgrant will be considered as a direct cost in the calculation because these funds will have direct or administrative costs associated with them. And next up, we have contingencies, and these are funds set aside for possible future expenses, unforeseen risks such as lawsuit settlements or refunds to TEA. And we do have a little example there, which is a monetary judgment against the district. These funds, contingency funds, are excluded from the calculation of the indirect cost rate. So you need to select the fund, function, and object code from the pull-down list, and then you enter a description and the amount of the contingency. Next, the next section is the Chief Executive Officer information or the CEO information. You need to enter all expenditures for Chief Executive Officers and their immediate support person, their state and local salaries and fixed costs by function and position name. These positions should correspond to the organizational chart that you'll be inserting and pasting within the ICRP ACW org chart tab that we looked at earlier. TA will review and verify that the org charts support the position titles and details entered in the section. In this section, the district enters costs related to the superintendent and chief executive officers within the school. The cost, facilities, and administrative associated with these positions are indirect costs when paid with state and local funds. However, when calculating the restricted indirect cost rate, these costs must be moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost or the MTDC base. The MTDC consists of your direct and unallowable cost. The positions that must be reported in this section include the superintendent, the immediate employee who serve as the executive or administrative assistant to the superintendent, all staff members who act as CEO of any component of the district, regardless of their actual titles. And this include member of your district-wide strategic planning and or executive management team or superintendent's cabinet. A component is an organizational unit that benefits the entire district. And on a district's organizational chart, the CEOs are generally one level below the superintendent, although in large districts, we've seen that CEOs may be two levels below the superintendent, and they generally hold job titles such as assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, chief financial officer, and human resource executive director. And you also need to input the immediate employee or employees who serve as the executive or administrative assistant to the CEO positions that you're going to be listing here. For each position, you need to enter the following information. You need to select the function code from which the indirect salary and fixed costs are paid from the pull-down list, the position title, the salary amount paid from state and local funds, the fixed cost amount paid from state and local funds, and the staff count for the position. If the position is funded from multiple functions, you do need to enter multiple line items for the position and only enter one on one line item under the staff count. And next up, we have terminal leave, and this is the last section. Terminal leave is leave paid to departing employees outside of normal routine payments for either the accumulation of vacation leave or as part of an employment contract. You need to answer yes or no to the question, did the LEA make payments to one or more departing employees for a terminal leave? And if your answer is no, then the section is complete and no further data entry is required. But if the answer is yes, you need to complete the section by providing the requested expenditure for each employee by providing the fund, function, and object from which the payment was made, and the location, job title, and name of the employee. Also select from the pull down the direct or indirect nature of the employee and the amount paid. Most districts do not have terminal leave because most do not provide formal vacation leave. Like I mentioned, this is the last section of the additional cost fiscal year 24 tab. And before we cover how to submit your completed ACW, Ashley is going to quickly go over some of the common mistakes we've come across during our review process. Ashley?
Thank you, Saida. Okay, so as Saida mentioned, in the next few slides, we're going to discuss some areas of opportunity to focus on when completing the following sections. So you will see kind of a little bit of repetitiveness from some slides that Saida went over, but it's just to refrain from having LEAs resubmit for any errors or missing data. So we do highly suggest and recommend utilizing that checklist that Saida discussed earlier in the presentation. And if you've heard this presentation before in the past, you may have heard me say that I like to take this opportunity to use it as an analogy, and I compare the checklist to a grocery list. So essentially, when you go to the grocery store or any store for that matter, you want to make sure that you get every item on the list that you have, because if you forget something, then you won't have all the ingredients you have to make that special dish or your dinner, your lunch, or whatever beautiful thing you're about to make at home with all the ingredients that you're going to buy. So similarly, it's going to be the same thing as ICRP ACW checklist. So we're going to use that as your guide to ensure that you have everything that you need to get that ICRP ACW recipe just right. So just before we look into the common mistakes, we do want to mention that we have implemented conditional formatting this year in the ACW workbook. So the way that it works is if there's data missing, then the cell will be highlighted in yellow. And if you've completed a section, but you still see a yellow highlight in that row, that just means that additional data is required. So again, like the checklist, we hope this feature will help LEAs avoid some of the errors that we're going to discuss here in the coming slides. So we're going to go ahead and get started with what I would say is one of the two, we do have 3 slides that we're going to go over, but one of the two biggest errors or kind of left out information that we've seen, and that's with the depreciation expenses. So our team has identified under depreciation expenses that either amounts were either left blank or the amount was under or over reported. So as mentioned, it's very important to report an expense here to prevent resubmission of information, which may delay processing times. And if the amount is reported as under or over reported, then the depreciation amounts can distort the indirect cost rates. So just again, as a reminder how to complete this part, you're going to enter the total depreciation charged to governmental funds, which includes expense amounts charged to governmental activities for both buildings improvements and furniture, equipment, and vehicles. For payments to fiscal agent and/or member districts of a shared services arrangement, we've noticed that incomplete data was reported. So again, it is important to select an answer from that pull down list you'll see at that top right hand side, and you'll be able to either select yes or no to this question, which the question is, did the LEA make payments to a fiscal agent and/or member district of an SSA with federal grants from Function 93? So keep in mind this question is asking about payments from federal grant funds. If you select no, then this section is completely done. But if you select yes, then you're going to enter all payments made to fiscal agents and/or member districts of an SSA for federally funded SSAs. You're going to enter the name of the SSA, include the ALN number. This is what's going to confirm that the payment was made with federal funds. And then you're going to include the begin, end date, and the amount. Some more areas of opportunity to focus on are under federal subrecipient items. Here, our team has identified incomplete data and no selection from the pull-down list. So again, just to kind of go over this section on how to complete it, you're going to select the pull-down list that's located at the right-hand side of the data sheet. Select yes or no to the question, did the school district distribute federal grant funds as a subgrant or as a federal grant pass-through fund? If no, then this section is complete. If yes, then you'll complete the section by providing the requested details on the subrecipient items, which include the fund, function, object codes under which the payment was made. You're going to enter the payee name, a description of the subrecipient item, the ALN number, begin and end date, and the amount. The next section under contingencies, this is another area to focus on to ensure a selection is made from all pull-down lists. You're going to select the fund, function, object code from the pull-down list and enter all expenditures for any I'm getting tongue twisted, y'all, for any contingencies that district has within its total governmental expenditures. Okay, so last but not least, but definitely probably the number one section that we see errors or missing data from is the Chief Executive Officer information. So common areas of opportunity include, again, there's no selection from the pull down list, so make sure if you're listing a CEO position, you should have something selected from that pull down list right next to their name. The number of positions were also not included in the past reviews that we've seen. And positions that should not be listed were also reported. So when completing this section, again, the way just kind of go across the board so you're not working too fast is you're going to start from the left-hand side, select that function code from the pull-down list from which the indirect salary fixed costs are paid from. You're going to list the position title, the salary amount paid from state and local funds, the fixed cost amount paid from state and local funds, and then you're going to list the staff count for that position. I'm going to give you some examples of positions that should not be listed under the CEO section. So positions which oversee a campus or focus population are not considered CEOs. So for example, campus principals, special education programs, federal programs, transportation programs, food service programs, art programs, or board of trustees. You may also view more of these examples of positions that should not be under this section, which can be found in the FAQ document, specifically questions 10 and 11, which is on page 2 of that FAQ. And again, that FAQ document is found on our indirect cost webpage, which is within the TEA website. It is important to complete the entirety of the ACW, as best as possible with true and accurate data because we do want to see a wonderful ICRP ACW recipe whenever we see and review it. That way it's like y'all are handing us a perfect cake and we can just blow the candles and then we can, send you off on the next steps. I'm going to go ahead and now hand it back over to Saida so that way she can go ahead and speak about how to submit the ICRP ACW.
Thank you, Ashley. Okay, so once the ICRP is completed, we'll quickly go over all the steps that you need to take to make sure that it's submitted correctly. The first thing is you need to log on to TEA login or TIL. Select GFFC reports and data collections, select upload response document, then select ICRP additional course workbook from the response template title, pull down menu. And then you need to select response document from the response doc type or pull down menu. Then select the school year for which you are requesting indirect cost rate from the school year pull-down menu. And if you're requesting or submitting, rather, in the fall of 2024 or spring of 2025, you need to select the school year 24-25, I'm sorry, excuse me, select 2025-2026 school year, and then you need to select upload document. And the document that you're submitting needs to be in Excel format. So we'll quickly look over the next steps, and then we'll look at how to review the ICRP. So what are the next steps? To receive indirect cost rate for 25-26, districts must submit the ICRP ACW by January 17th, 2025. Then TA's Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division will collect the final 23-24 PIMS data in the spring of 2025 to complete the data needed to create the ICRP. Then we'll merge the data, the district submitted ICRP ACW data with the PIMS data to create and pre-populate to complete the ICRP. Then TA will post the complete ICRPs in GFFC reports for districts review. Then districts will be required to review and certify acceptance of the resulting indirect cost rate. And then we usually give districts approximately about a month to review their indirect cost rate proposal or ICRP and submit the ICRP certification. And then the new rates will become effective July 1st of 2025. Okay, so how do we review the ICRP? This is the financial worksheet. Again, when first generated, the ICRP is an Excel form, and that is why we request the ACW to be submitted in an Excel format. Once it is generated as an Excel form, it will then be converted into PDF form and then posted in GFFC reports and data collection. And again, like I said, that is the reason we request districts to submit their ACW in Excel format. And if we receive a PDF, then we'll have to ask for a resubmission. And if your district would like to see the completed ICRP Excel format or the Excel version, you can email us at compliance@tea.texas.gov, and we'll be happy to provide you with the Excel ICRP. When reviewing the ICRP, you'll notice that the pages are labeled on the bottom of each page. The first page is the ICRP certification, and then on pages 2 to 3, you find your U1 all years, which is the summary of the unrestricted rates data average for all 3 years. And then pages 5 to 6 is R1 all years, which is the summary of the restricted rates data average for all 3 years. On page 4, you find the restricted rate adjustment all, this is the page which will show the average for all 3 years of indirect cost adjustment. These are the costs that are being moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost, which consists your direct and unallowable cost. On the U1 or unrestricted rates tab, ISD expenditures are classified as either excluded, unallowable direct or indirect cost based on the fund function and object code. And costs that are classified as indirect costs on U1 tab used for unrestricted rate calculation are then adjusted to determine the restricted rate. And these are the costs that are being reclassified from indirect to the base, which include your general management costs that are associated with the chief executive officers and their immediate officers, and the component officers are and their related costs. Adjustments to the unrestricted rate calculations are made and result in a lower rate to claim indirect cost reimbursement on restricted rate programs. Section 4 of the restricted rate adjustment all will provide the average amount that is being moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost on the restricted rate calculation tab. Then we have pages 7 to 18, which contain the supporting data for each of the 3 fiscal years and show the average data elements which were used to produce the resulting rates. So these pages contain, of course, the additional costs workbook that was submitted by districts, and then the PIMS data, financial data. The year one will be pages 7 to 10, which is the fiscal year 2022. And then pages 11 to 14 will be your year two, which is the fiscal 2023 year data. And then year three will be pages 15 to 18, which will be the fiscal year 2024 data. And once your district is done reviewing the ICRP, the final step in the process is submitting the ICRP certification. Please note that the ICRP certification is different from the ACW certification. The ACW certification we looked at earlier will certify that all submitted data is true and accurate and has the contact information of the person completing the workbook. Whereas the ICRP certification that you see here is the district certification of the information contained within the proposal, which is page 1 of the ICRP. To accept and finalize your district's rates, this certification of indirect cost, which is the page 1 of the ICRP, must be completed, signed, and submitted back to TEA. The certification must be signed by the school district superintendent, chief executive officer, or chief financial officer. Certification must be for the correct school year, so 25-26 for next cycle. And submission of the ICRP certification is the district's last step to be issued indirect cost rate for 25-26. And to complete the certification, you do need to print the certification page, enter the required information, have the superintendent, CEO, or CFO sign and date the printed page, scan the signed and dated page, and then upload the scanned certification into a GFFC report as ICRP certification. Here is the steps on how to submit the ICRP certification. I'll quickly go over it. You again need to log into TA login or TL, select GFFC reports and data collection, select upload response document, select ICRP certification from the response template title pull-down menu. Then you need to select response document from response doc type or pull-down menu, select the school year 25-26 from the school year pull-down menu, and then select upload document. One final note regarding uploading documents to GFFC, which is a really a good habit, is please always make sure that you index your document with the correct document title and school year. This practice ensures that when we generate reports, that we accurately capture your submission. And then once all certifications are been submitted by LEA's, TA will subsequently post the approved certified indirect cost rates on the indirect cost rates webpage. Additionally, we will be issuing individual district notification letters, which will be uploaded into GFFC reports and data collection. And as outlined in the provided timeline, I will actually go ahead and quickly briefly remind you of our timeline. The ACW was made available on October 31st. It's available through our website and the GFFC reports and data collection. And the due date is January 17th. And TEA will post the complete ICRPs by April 17, 2025. And those are going to be made available in GFFC. And then districts will be required to review and certify their rates by May 16. 2025. And then the final rates will become available, and we will post the rates by July 1st, 2025. That is when they will become effective. And that concludes our presentation on requesting rates for a 25-26 school year. We have covered the entire process from start to finish. And of course, if you have any question or need help with the workbook, please feel free to reach out to us at compliance@tea.texas.gov. We do monitor that compliance inbox and aim to reply to emails within a day. So that's the best way to reach us. And then if there are any questions remaining in the Q&A, we'll address those at this time. And I'll also like to mention we are holding an office hour on January 9th and communication, a gap delivery regarding on how to register for that has been sent out today. Wow. Okay. While we open it up to questions, could you please do us a big favor and scan this QR code to provide feedback on today's presentation? Your input is really important to us as we strive to improve and provide you with better trainings. And so please take a minute, scan this QR code and provide us with your feedback. And thank you. Thank you for